Hello everyone, today we are going to talk about the classical Greek era, and I'm going to give a quick introduction. So this monumental period lasted from the 5th century BCE to the 4th century BCE, and it completely reshaped the foundation of Western civilization. To give you some historical context, this era began right after Greek victory over Persia, and it is widely known as the Golden Age of Greece, which eventually ended after the sudden death of Alexander the Great. It is called the Golden Age of Persia because of its massive achievements, which is the literal birthplace of modern democracy, groundbreaking philosophy, and even timeless art and architecture that we still study today. A huge part of their legacy was theater, and their plays deeply exploring human actions and the complex will of the gods, reflecting how they viewed their own worlds. To leave you with a thought from the historian Thucydides, featured on the slide, the measure of a man is what he does with power, and that the dynamic balance of power, art, and intellect is exactly what makes this era so fascinating. Now, moving on to the historical background. Greece's prominence during this era really came from the rise of powerful independent city, most notably Athens. A major turning point happened right after the Battle of Salamis in 480 BCE. Defeating the Persians allowed Athens to grow incredibly strong, not just militarily, but as a massive cultural powerhouse. Because of this newfound stability, Athens became the home of the world's first democracy. It wasn't just a political system on paper. It is where citizens actively were encouraged to join public debates and have a real say in how their society was run. This open culture of questioning and debating is exactly what fueled their philosophical boom. However, it wasn't all golden. Severe conflicts eventually tore things apart, and most notably the Peloponnesian War, which created massive internal unrest across Greece. These intense political struggles and the harsh realities of war heavily influenced Greek tragedies, which forced playwrights to move away from simple entertainment and instead create deeper and much more serious and reflective works. And that brings us perfectly to how this chaotic background directly shaped their daily culture and lifestyle, which we will look next. And now let's look through the daily life of the citizens through culture, lifestyle, and fashion. To begin with, civic duty and piety weren't just abstract concepts, they were absolutely central to their daily life and identity. All of this happened out in the open. The agora and the theater serve as key physical spaces for social gatherings, cultural events, and deep philosophical debates. When it comes to core values, Greek society deeply prized intellect, moral reflection, and answers from temples and oracles. They constantly look for divine guidance while simultaneously pushing the boundaries of human logic and reason. And we can even see this course reflected in their fashion. Their clothing emphasized balance, proportion, and draped garments, most notably pieces like the Triton and Himation. It was all about simple lines, simplicity, and structure. Ultimately, whether it was through their politics, their clothing, or their philosophy, the classical Greeks aimed for balance and order in everything they did.
So, for my part, is characteristic of the era. First is strong belief in faith in the god. One of the most important characteristics in the era in Oedipus was the strong belief in faith and the power of the god. Ancient Greek believed that human life was determined by divine force and that no one could escape that destiny. This belief is shown through the prophecy that Oedipus would kill his father and marry his mother, which came true despite his effort to avoid it. Second is importance of kinship and social order. Another important characteristic was the significance of kinship and social order. Kings were expected to protect their people and maintain stability within society. In the play, the citizens of Thebes looked to Oedipus' rights for leadership and guidance during the plague, demonstrating the important role of important role in ancient Greek society. So for the last is religious and moral value. Religious and moral value also play a central role in the life of the ancient Greek. People regularly pray to the god and sought guidance for religious figure. The play highlight the importance of humility and respect for divine authority, as Oedipus' pride and stubbornness ultimately contribute to his tragic downfall. That's all for me. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Law, and I'll be discussing briefly about the author behind our chosen literary work, Sophocles, the Supreme Aramis. Now, to give a brief background on Sophocles, he was born in colonist Athens to a relatively affluent family, where he was taught the different arts, such as music, gymnastics, dance, and poetry. And because of this upbringing, in addition to his natural talent, he became one of the most renowned playwright/tragedian in ancient Greek, and has brought about many innovations to the world of literature. An example of one of his contributions includes the introduction of three actors in a single play, which allowed for more complex plays to be conducted compared to the traditional two-actor play. And to discuss briefly on a typical Sophoclean play would include a few heroic characters with a few compelling qualities or faults, whose actions and hubris would inevitably lead them to a tragic fate, and that harms not only themselves but those around them. Now we'll be moving on to a quick summary of the story of Oedipus Rex, in case any of you want more details. So, let's begin. In the plague-stricken city of Thebes, the crops are failing, the children are being born stillborn, and their mothers are dying from childbirth complications. And so, a priest goes to the palace to seek aid from King Oedipus, who became the king of Thebes after he saved the city from the tyranny of the dreadful Sphinx. So, Oedipus reveals that he had already sent his brother-in-law, Creon, to seek aid from the oracles of Apollo in Delphi, and soon after, Creon comes back bearing the news that in order for the plague to end, they must find the murderer of the King Laius, who was the former king of Thebes, and either execute or exile this murderer. And so Oedipus states that he would spare no effort in order to find this murderer and essentially do justice. So Oedipus calls for Tiresias, a seer, who he wanted to ask if they could share what they know about this murder. Tiresias, however, after arriving, vehemently refuses to give any information, stating that it will only cause chaos and bring more trouble into the situation. Oedipus, however, continues to press Tiresias and even goes as far as to accuse Tiresias of being the murderer of King Laius. So Tiresias, understandably offended by this accusation, decides to reveal it, and what he reveals was very shocking. But as you all know, what he revealed was that it was actually Oedipus. Oedipus was the very murderer that they are looking for. Oedipus, again, understandably offended, accuses Tiresias of conspiring with his brother-in-law Creon in order to overthrow him and take his throne. So he threatens to have Creon captured and executed for treason. However, Jocasta, wife to Oedipus and sister to Creon, steps in and intervenes. She tells Oedipus that to not look too deep into this prophecy, stating that the prophecy states that Laius would be killed by his own son. However, from what they know, King Laius was killed at a three-way crossroad by a band of thieves, not an individual. So this clearly dispels it, right? However, this actually causes Oedipus to recount his own experience from arriving to Thebes, where he does remember encountering a group of people at a three-way crossroad and killing them in self-defense. So, this causes Oedipus to decide to even continue investigating, since he wants to know. He recounts how when he was back in Corinth, his city of origin, where he was at a party, heard some gossip rumors that he was not the true son of the kings and queens of Corinth, the king and queen of Corinth. And so he goes to a prophet in order to dispel his questions, essentially, his doubts. Yeah, his doubts. However, instead, what he received was a prophecy stating that he would kill his father and marry his mother. So, understandably so, he tried to evade this prophecy by leaving Corinth. And now we come back to the present, where he, on the journey, encountered some people on the freeway crossroad and killed them in self-defense. And soon he arrived in Thebes, where he rescued the people from the tyranny of the Sphinx and became king, where he also married Jocasta, the widowed queen of Thebes. So, moving back to the present, Oedipus decides to send for a shepherd who was the sole survivor from the attack on Laius. However, before the shepherd was able to arrive, a messenger arrives from Corinth, where the messenger tells the royal couple that King Polybus, who was, at the time, we know as Oedipus' father, had passed away from old age, and this, understandably so, caused the royal couple to be overjoyed, because this means that the prophecy that states that Oedipus would kill his own father and marry his mother is false, since his father is dead. He could not possibly fulfill this prophecy, right? But that joy was soon killed once again when the messenger revealed to Oedipus that he was in fact not the blood-related son of Polybus. Instead, that he was given to them as a baby by a shepherd, the very same shepherd that later arrived to the palace, the sole survivor of the attack on Laius. The shepherd then goes on to reveal that in truth, he was asked by King Laius and Jocasta at the time to take their child and have the child be killed after being exiled because of the prophecy. However, the shepherd could not stomach the idea of doing this and therefore gave the child to the messenger, who then gave it to the king and queen of Corinth. This revelation caused Oedipus to understand the entire situation, because the shepherd continued to reveal that it was indeed Oedipus, because this revelation caused Oedipus to realize that he was in fact the murderer of King Laius, and that when the people he encountered at the three-way crossroad who taunted him and he killed in self-defense were actually King Laius and his men. And after realizing this, Oedipus was understandably shaken, and his mental state was in disarray, and it was further thrown into disarray when he returned to the palace and realized that Jocasta, after realizing the same thing, had herself hanged and essentially committed suicide. So Oedipus, shocked by the revelation and essentially tormented by his own guilt, took the pins from Jocasta's gown and stabbed his own eyes. Yes, that was in fact something that had happened. So it's a bit gruesome, but let's continue. Oedipus then begs Creon to essentially have him exiled, because he understands that he was the very person that they were looking for, and that in order to save Thebes, he had to be exiled. He was the very person who killed his father and married his mother. His father being Laius, his mother being Jocasta. So he begs Creon to have him exiled, and also hopes that Creon could take care of his two daughters before doing so. And so after Creon promises to this deal, Oedipus was inevitably exiled from Thebes, and that's where the story comes to an end. So that is the summary of the story of Oedipus Rex.
People of Thebes, do not worry.
Oh, wait, what's going on?
Let's go back to where everything went wrong. A prophecy was made. A child would kill his father and marry his mother. How scandalous! Terrified, the king and queen gave the baby to a shepherd to be abandoned on a mountain, but the child survived and was taken to Corinth. Raised as a prince, how lucky! Until one day, a rumor changed everything. Gasp! He was not their real son. Double gasp! Seeking answers, he turned to the oracle and was given a foul prophecy. Determined to escape fate, he ran away, but on the road, a quarrel broke out, and in anger, he killed a stranger, not knowing it was his real father. He arrived in Thebes, a hero. He solved the Sphinx's riddle, cheers, and became king, double cheers. And then he married the queen. He then became the king he was meant to be. Hip hip hooray! Years later, a plague struck the city, and then the truth was about to be revealed. I wonder what it could be. The city of Thebes is in trouble. King Oedipus is determined to find the cause, and definitely not make things worse. Definitely not.
People of Thebes, do not worry. I, your intelligent and totally problem-free king, will solve everything.
He said that every time.
Bring in Tiresias, the man who knows everything.
I know many things, including things you really don't want to hear.
Perfect. Now tell me, who caused this plague?
You did.
That is impossible.
You are the problem.
I am literally the solution.
No, you are the cause. Also, you might want to sit down for this.
No, I don't sit. King stands dramatically.
Fine. You have fulfilled the prophecy we were trying to avoid.
I avoided it perfectly.
You really didn't. You killed your father.
No, this sounds like fake news.
And married your mother.
That is impossible.
We told him not to ask questions.
No, this must be a misunderstanding. That is impossible. I am a very responsible person.
Your confidence is impressive, but your situation is not.
Why is my life like this?
Because of the prophecy.
Because of your stupidity.
No, because it's fate. And so Oedipus begins to realize that sometimes the truth is worse than not knowing.
Hi. Now, I'll be explaining about the literary perspective that we choose in Oedipus Rex. So, the literary perspective that we choose to analyze Oedipus Rex's play is the psychological literary perspective. So, this perspective, it focuses on characters' emotions, fears, thoughts, and inner conflict. So, we explore Oedipus's emotion and how is his tragic flaws sort of slowly lead him towards his own destruction using the psychological lens. So one of Oedipus's main tragic flaw, or in Greek we call it the hamartia, is his own pride. He believed that he can uncover the truth by himself and solve every problem. So besides his pride, he's also very impulsive, easily angered, and often in denial state. So for example, when Tiresias warns him about the prophecy, Oedipus, he becomes angry and he started accusing others instead of listening to it calmly or even try to investigate it. Another important psychological aspect is denial. So during the investigation, Oedipus, he refused to accept the truth and he keeps on blaming others. However, as the story continues, he slowly realized that he himself fulfilled the prophecy by killing his own father and marrying his mother. So this moment of realization is known as anagnosis in Greek, or tragic realization. So after Oedipus realized the truth, he felt too guilty about what happened. And because of this overwhelming guilt and emotional suffering, Oedipus he blinds himself as a form of self-punishment. So earlier in the play, he was emotionally blind to the truth, but after discovering the reality, the truth, he chooses to physically blind himself. And finally, the author, he created catharsis for the audience, where the audience, they feel pity and fear while watching Oedipus suffer. So overall, this psychological perspective, it shows how human flaws and uncontrolled emotions can actually lead to our self-destruction or our own downfall. That'll be all for my part. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Now that we have finished discussing the main plot, characters, and themes of Oedipus Rex, we're going to move on to our next activity, which is a Kahoot quiz. For this activity, some of you will need to form groups of up to 10 members before joining the quiz. Please make sure your group is ready and that at least one member has a device that can access Kahoot. To join the games, you can either enter the game pin that will be displayed on the screen or simply scan the QR code provided. Once you have joined, please use your group name as your nickname. The purpose of this Kahoot quiz is to test and reinforce your understanding of Oedipus Rex. The question will cover important events, characters, themes, and key lessons from the play. Each question is a multiple choice, and the faster your group answers correctly, the more points you will earn. Remember to discuss the answers with your group members before making your choice. This is a team effort, so communication and cooperation are important. Most importantly, have fun while learning and don't worry too much about making mistakes. This is a great opportunity to review when we learn together. Please take a moment now to form your group, join the Kahoot, either the game pin or QR code, and make sure everyone is ready. Once all groups have joined, we'll begin the quiz. Good luck everyone, and let's see which group comes up on the top.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vimal Nair, and today I will be presenting some fun facts about the classical Greek theatre, one of the most important foundations of modern drama and literature. So, Greek theatre began in ancient Greece around the 5th century BC and played a major role in entertainment, religion, and education. It had influenced the way we perform and appreciate theatre even today. So, fun facts number 1 is about the mask. Greek actors wore large masks during performance. These masks helped the audience to identify different characters and emotions such as happiness, sadness, anger, or fear. Since theatres were very large, masks made it easier for people sitting far away to understand the story. So number 2 is there are only male acted in Greek plays. Women were not allowed to perform on stage. Male actors played all roles, including female characters. They used different masks, costumes, and voices to portray various characters throughout the performance. So fun fact number 3 is religious festival. Many performances were dedicated to Dionysus, the Greek god of wine and theatre. This festival brought communities together and became important cultural events where playwrights completed to present the best plays. So fun fact number 4, which is themes, where Greek tragedies both explored powerful themes such as fate, pride, justice, and human suffering. Through these stories, audiences were encouraged to reflect on human behavior, moral choices, and the consequences of one's actions. And last but not least, which is legacy, where Greek literature and theatre have greatly influenced modern drama, poetry, and philosophy. Many storytelling techniques, theatrical structures, and literature themes used today originated from ancient Greeks, making its impact still relevant in the modern world. So, that's all from me. Thank you.
So hi, my name is Vimal Nair Suresh. So today I'm going to present for the conclusion part. So the classical Greek period is one of the most influential era in literary history, and also Greek literature explore important themes such as fate, free will, morality, leaderships, and also human emotions. From the Oedipus wrecks reflect the values and belief of classical Greek societies. And also the tragedy of Oedipus demonstrate how pride, anger, fear, and poor decision can lead to personal downfalls. And the contribution of the Sophocles plays a significant role in the development of Greek tragedy and the world literature. And also throughout the psychological and cultural analysis, shows why the Oedipus wrecks remain relevant in the modern societies, and also the studies provide valuable lessons about the self-awareness, emotional controls, accountability, and the pursuits of the truth. And the classical Greek literature continues to influence modern literature, philosophy, and critical thinking. So that's all for my part. Thank you.